Tell us a little bit about your book, or maybe first is the journey of how do you end up writing a book? Because we all have every author has a story on how they started the book and why.
Yeah.
And is it an internal thing or an external thing? How did your book's coming out soon. So tell us a little bit the journey of how did you end up with the idea and what's it been like? And then maybe take us into the story.
Yeah, thanks. So to go just all the way back for just a second, I loved
Sure.
writing as a little kid. I mean, I loved to run around in the woods, and then I loved writing stories about animals, and I just filled up journals with it. And when I was 12, I actually wrote a novel. So this is the one that's coming out is actually my second novel that I've written,
Oh,
first to be
that's
published. Yeah. But I entered that novel. This is also probably something very familiar to many people. Entered that novel into my school's book contest. And they were usually kind of short stories. They made me do illustrations because that's what they were expecting. And I was like, that's kind of weird, but okay. And then so I entered it, and it got the second to lowest possible score, which
awesome.
was just devastating.
Good place to start, though.
Well, it didn't feel that way at the time. At the time, it just felt like total rejection, because I was so excited about this book. I thought everyone was going to love it as much as I did. And so it just kind of crushed my 12-year-old self. And so I stopped writing after that for a long time, wrote a few short stories in high school. But basically it was a slow road back to writing. And I started writing for my coaching blog. And then I started having ideas for short stories for that, kind of allegorical short stories. So I did those. And then finally, this is about 25 years after my, my initial rejection when I was 12, got the idea for a novel. So it was kind of coming back full circle when I did. And the way the idea came to me, I was on a walk near my house. I was heading back from the woods, and I saw this robin, and there was just something about this robin's eyes that were just so knowing and wise and loving. And I just had this thought, like, human beings, we tend to put ourselves at the top of any hierarchy we're in. We think of ourselves as exceptional and better than everything else, and more evolved and more all of this and all that. And I was like, what if that just weren't true? What if these animals were actually higher in the hierarchy than we are, or they know more than we do, or have something to offer, beyond what we think they do. And so from that, kind of a story evolved. And then as I was developing the story, I was kind of thinking about, what do I wish I had known when I was 25, and going through that kind of difficult transition right after college, when I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and everything felt uncertain and scary. And it was hard to navigate. And I had a lot of friends who had a hard time navigating that time too. So
yes.
Yeah. So I was kind of thinking, what do I wish I had known then? And then I also was thinking, with the natural world, we as human beings, we have this very fraught relationship with the natural world, and a very strained relationship. And so I was thinking, what would the natural world tell us if it had a voice? And so those are kind of the things that inspired the development of the novel.
As you're saying that, a bit reminded of a podcast or a lecture I was listening to, and the person was sharing, humans are the only ones who aren't at home in our environment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Powerful. You think about it. You're right. The robin is totally situated completely, and they're right where they belong. They're in the either north or in the springtime of the summer, and they're in the south. I mean, so all animals are at home in their environment except us.
Yeah, and that, to tie it back to the depression that I felt, I feel like depression in a lot of ways, at least for me, it's different for everyone, but for me, it was a lot about disconnection from myself, disconnection from other people, and disconnection from the wider living world. So there's this, we are animals, human beings are animals, and we forget that. That's the title of my novel is This Animal Body, because our bodies, I feel like, connect us to that. And when we stop trying to make ourselves separate and better than and exceptional, then we realize we're actually part of something far larger than ourselves. We belong. There's a sense of belonging that we're missing out on because we're so intent on being different. But when we remember how similar we are, we get that sense of belonging to something larger. And that was really healing for me in terms of my own depression and mental health.
We have so much more in common and
Mm.
we highlight we seem to highlight the differences,
Mhm.
and at times, celebrate the difference, which is great, but
Mhm.
it does lead to a fractional kind of a state, and everybody end up, if you keep fractioning yourself and dividing and dividing, you end up very much alone, and look at yourself like a freak of nature, right? You don't have anything in common
Mhm.
with anybody. You forget the fact
Mhm.
that you have a lot in common, but we
Yeah.
keep fractionalizing and hierarching the differences, and that ends up being, very, hey, you're like without a purpose, right? You don't belong, you're not anchored.